Hello, welcome back to the 8-Bit Guy. So, quick little backstory here. I'm starting to work on that Amiga documentary that everybody keeps pestering about for the last 2 years. And one of the things I needed was a stock Amiga 1000. Now, I already had an Amiga 1000, but mine is heavily modified. And I wanted to be able to show a stock original Amiga 1000 because it's a pretty important part of the history. Well, so I didn't have one, and this one was donated to me about a year and a half ago by Dan Merwin. And I'm just now getting around to doing something with it. I actually plugged it in yesterday and it actually does work, but it's very yellowed and very dirty, so it needs the usual 8-Bit Guy restoration. So I actually thought about doing this behind the scenes because I could probably get it done in 3 or 4 days, but I put a poll on Patreon and it seemed like the overwhelming majority wanted me to actually do a dedicated video to the restoration, so that's what we're going to do. I'll start by letting you have a look at the current condition. Now, from this distance, the computer looks to be in good shape, albeit a bit yellowed. The keyboard, on the other hand, is pretty disgusting if you have a close look at it. Looking at the Amiga badge, it appears to have retained the correct color of the machine, where the plastics around it have yellowed. However, one of the most disgusting parts of this computer is the mouse. And sure, it's yellow and all, but the cable is extremely sticky and covered in melted styrofoam. Now, if you look at the box it came in, you can see where the cable was melted into the styrofoam. This is probably a result of a chemical reaction between the plasticizer in the cable and the styrofoam. The rear of the computer is also pretty badly yellowed. Oh, and one last thing is, I'm missing the cable that goes from here to here, so I'll have to make one. Fortunately, it's just an RJ11 connector, so that shouldn't be too hard. Alright, so let's get to work. I'll start with Windex as usual, just to get all the dirt off. There's some minor scuffs on the top, so I'll scrub those with alcohol. And now it's time to start disassembly. There are 2 snaps on each side of the case, so I'll take care not to break those. And here we go. The Amiga has a very thick RF shield, but I'm amazed how good of shape it's in. No corrosion on it at all. Now we'll get our first look inside the computer, and I'm breathing a sigh of relief because it's in pretty much perfect condition here. I don't foresee needing to do any cleanup or recapping or anything like that. Now I'll remove the expansion RAM module in the front and get everything else taken apart. Actually need to remove the daughter board here for the restoration, but while I have it apart, I need to go ahead and get some still pictures of the motherboard that I'll use later in the documentary. Well, the weather is total overcast and will be for a while, so I'm going to have to do this indoors under UV light. I want to get as many things as I can in the bucket here, and since the middle of the front bezel isn't yellowed, it should be okay to lay them out like this. I've set up my indoor retrobriting contraption again. One fascinating thing I noticed is that under UV light, the stuff that was most yellowed was also, ironically, the brightest and most fluorescent. I had trouble really capturing the contrast on camera compared to how it looked to the naked eye. I tried a few other cameras with interesting results. Anyway, so here we are, almost 51 hours later, and I'm ready to remove these from the bucket. I mean, I think they're done. Well, the rear piece still has some yellowing, as you can see the original color in this ring around the edge that was normally covered up. But I think the other 2 pieces are done, so I'm going to get these rinsed off. I thought I'd put the front cover up to the top case and see how they compare now. Well, time to do that top piece. That's just too darn big to submerge, so I'm going to have to use the plastic wrap method. However, I've had good luck with this method, especially under UV lights, because it's much gentler than sunlight. Of course, it takes a lot longer. Of course, that extra time means I can come out every few hours and massage the cream around to prevent any splotches. Okay, so while we're waiting on that, I'll get to work on this keyboard. And here's something I've not seen before. There are little covers over the screws on the keyboard. Now you can see the nightmare that was underneath all of those keys. I'm going to take this outside and hit it with some compressed air. And I actually got rid of about 90% of it right there. I'll follow that up with some Windex. There we go. That doesn't look too bad. I will say, this keyboard is made much higher quality than anything else from Commodore. I mean, it uses individual switches for each key, and the thing is really heavy with a lot of metal. I'm actually sort of surprised. Okay, now time to clean up these keyboard case pieces and get them ready for Retrobrite. And now the fun part, cleaning 89 individual keys. I've never found a better way to do this than to do each by hand. As you can see, the results are worth it. I think the way I'm going to retrobrite these is by submerging them in peroxide inside of a Ziploc bag. I tried this before with decent success. I'm just going to put these down next to the case, and every hour or so I'll come out here and flip the bags over to make sure everything gets proper exposure. And now I'll turn my attention to this mouse. Cleaning it and retrobriting it should be easy. My real concern is with this gnarly cable. It feels horrible. It's sticky, rough feeling, and stiff. I actually worked on this cable for nearly an hour, scrubbing small sections with alcohol. You can see it's working, as here's the section I've cleaned, and here's the next gnarly section to move to next. But after about an hour, it came out pretty good. The cable's clean, it actually feels smooth and soft to the touch, and it's very flexible now. Now, back to our keys. Looks like they're done. They still need to dry off, though, so we'll come back to that. In the meantime, we'll take apart this mouse so it can start retrobriting. And I'm going to use the same method for this, just a couple of Ziploc bags. And while waiting on that, I'll clean the ball, and then, more important parts, these gunked up rollers. Seriously, cleaning the ball is pointless if you don't get this crud off the rollers, and I've found no better way than to mechanically scraping it off, and then following that up with alcohol on a cotton swab. Speaking of cotton swabs, I'll also take this opportunity to clean the heads of the disk drive with some alcohol, and re-lubricate all the moving parts with lithium grease. Oh, and I threw the little disk drive button in with the keys to be retrobrited, so it's all done now, and I'll put that back on. And might as well test it with a disk. I think we're good here. Now that the keys are dried off, I'll start reassembling those. And I'll start with the hard ones. These are the ones with the little metal crossbars. And of course, I'll re-lubricate those sections. And now the rest of the keys. Well, this looks a million times better than it did a few days ago. One issue I wanted to point out was the over-brightened badges. These are brighter than their original factory color. I've seen this happen before, and in most cases it will return to the factory color after a few days or weeks. But if it doesn't, then I can always swap the badges with my other Amiga 1000 so that I have a perfect computer for the documentary. Alright, let's pull off the plastic from this top case. This is the piece I'm most concerned about since it is large and flat, and any marbling or splotches will be most visible on this piece. Fortunately, I think I'm in luck. I don't see any signs of marbling. It looks great. And now to retrobrite the keyboard. I'm actually going to keep these two pieces together for this. It's mostly the top and the sides of the keyboard that need help anyway. And I'm also going to do the same treatment to this rear piece since it's still a bit yellow. And I'll let these go for 24 hours or so under the UV lights. This has been the real bottleneck of this project. So many pieces to treat and only have so much UV light available. Okay, the next day has arrived. The mouse is looking good, so I'll go ahead and rinse it off. And then I can reassemble it. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how the mouse has turned out. And now I'll dry off the keyboard piece and start reassembling that. By the way, since this keyboard did not come with a cable, I decided just to order a standard telephone handset cable from Amazon. Actually, I got two different colors so I could see which one matched the color best. I think I'll go with this one. Yeah, I think it matches pretty well. I'll just plug that right in there. I think that'll work fine. So I'm now finished with the keyboard and mouse, if only I had the computer done. Time for the bottom case. This is a really irritating shape to deal with. It's too big to submerge, but also not well suited to plastic wrap either. But it's mostly the sides that need treatment, so I have a plan. I put my UV lights on the ground and arrange them so that they shine right where I need them. Well, let's hope this works. And here we are, 24 hours later. Seems to have worked pretty well. So at this point, I'll start reassembling the computer. There are 14 screws for this RF shield, and I thought, before I screw all these in, maybe I should do a quick test of the computer and make sure it's working. I just grabbed a little TV and connected it to the composite output. That should be good enough for a test. And yep, boots all the way up to Workbench, so I think we're good. So, for dramatic effect, let's go back and look how it looked originally. And here we go now, all finished. This computer now looks good enough to appear in my Amiga documentary. I suppose we should connect up a monitor and make sure everything is working. It boots up to Workbench fine. The mouse seems to be working perfectly. I'll even open a notepad here and test out the keyboard. Yep, that's working perfectly too. I suppose there's only one more test we need, which is playing a game, and I can't think of anything better to show than the new Amiga version of Petscii Robots. I'll use the CD32 controller as it's the best option for playing this game at the moment. I will mention that there's no music because this Amiga only has 512K of RAM, even with the expansion module it has. But the game requires more RAM than that for music, so the game just disables music on 512K systems, but at least it does work. And if you're interested, this port of the game is complete and available for sale at this point. Okay, so now that we're finished with the Amiga restoration, I have a little bit of bad news, and it revolves around this guy. So this is my Mac Mini that I've been using for like 10 years, because this is a 2011 model. And this is what I do all of my video editing on. I actually have newer computers around the house, but because this one has just always been set up with Final Cut Pro, and it's got the RAM I need and all that kind of stuff, it always works. I've just used it. And unfortunately, when I was in the middle of editing, actually not in the middle, almost completely finished editing this video, the hard drive died. Like, just froze up right in the middle of using it. Computer wouldn't reboot anymore. And I'm just pulling my hair out because I was like 95% done editing this video. I spent like 2 days trying to recover any information off the hard drive on here. Now, I'm not the kind of person that keeps a lot of information on a desktop computer because I have my NAS drives for that. And so, in fact, all of the source files for this video were, of course, backed up on the NAS drive. So I was able to recover all the source files, but I could never recover the Final Cut project file. So I ended up having to re-edit this video from scratch, and it took about 8 hours to redo it. So I finished editing up the video using my MacBook Air, which is also several years old, but I took this opportunity to order one of those new Mac Minis with the M1 processor in it. Now, I'm not going to have it until mid-January based on Apple's estimated shipping date, but I'll get to find out what all the hype is about on that. But anyway, it's done. I did want to mention, though, unfortunately, I did lose some stuff for the upcoming Amiga documentary. Nothing super critical. Like, for example, one of the things I lost was the script, which I had been writing in a notepad on the hard drive here. So I'm going to have to start over with that. But nevertheless, I do expect that Amiga documentary to come out sometime in the early part of 2022. So keep your eye out for that. Guess that wraps it up for this episode. So as always, thanks for watching.